Now, some cities are beginning to reopen their economies, while others are extending strict lockdown measures and business shutters in certain areas. All this is creating an uneven trajectory for the country's property market. Will real estate be able to chart a strong rebound from the COVID-induced slowdown? Let's ask our next guest, AboitizLands President and CEO Dave Rafael. Hi, Dave.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
How are you? Good, sir. So, I heard you're able to keep 50% of your pre-ECQ reservation volumes, and you say the only reason why you don't have the other 50% is because they're traditional buyers who still want to see the property first? Is that true?
Yes, actually, Michelle, AboitizLands has been quite fortunate because very early on, even without anticipating this pandemic, we had invested in the tools to do digital selling. You have to understand, real estate is fairly traditional when it comes to selling. I mean, it involves basically 3 steps. One is being a qualified buyer. Number 2 is convincing that prospect to buy, and usually entails having to bring them to the site, or what we call tripping. And number 3 is closing the sale through payments and documentation. And all these years, it's done pretty much the traditional way, a lot of physical contact with the client. So the challenge was, with this lockdown, how do you do those 3 basic steps in selling without actually physically having contact with the buyer? And we were able to do that because, as I said, we had invested very early on, where we are able to do all of these 3 steps digitally. So for finding prospects, instead of passing out leaflets in malls or putting up big billboards along main highways with a phone number, we were actually doing a lot of digital ads in various social media platforms, and we would get a lot of inquiries from those ads. And also, we would qualify them digitally. In terms of tripping, in terms of communicating with the prospect, we do it online, and we developed a whole range of virtual tours where the prospect can see the whole property, the whole site, 360 degrees, and it's the actual project, it's the actual product they see. And lastly, in closing the sale, again, our documents are online. They can sign the reservation agreement or whatever form digitally, because there are e-signature facilities. In terms of making payments, we've got various online digital payment platforms that they can use, so that they basically close the sale and make the payment in the comfort of their home.
Wow, all of this done digitally, Dave.
All of this done digitally, and as I said, we were pleasantly surprised that we were doing 60% of our sales compared to our sales pre-lockdown. So, and I think we'll even get better. We'll get better because we're continuing to improve the process. And
were you surprised, Dave, that Filipinos are actually willing to make big ticket purchases like buying a property all online?
You know, it's surprising, Mitch, but the level of interest of the public in property, based on the number of inquiries and based on the number of whether they be phone calls or whether they be digital inquiries, has not declined. We continue to get the same level of inquiries about our projects. Of course, the conversion rate is not as high because a lot of them are financially challenged, right? But the interest is there, and it's just really just a matter of time, just keeping them warm, keeping them updated, because that at some point, once they recover their financial footing, they'll be ready to buy.
That was my next question. I mean, it's great to know you guys were able to pivot quickly to virtual showings, fully digital closings, but I imagine the real test will come in the next few months when we see just how much cash there is in a given market that the buyers can use for their housing costs. What is the outlook on that?
That's true, Michelle. I mean, I'm not denying that the business property industry is really facing challenging times, and that's because I mean, who have been the most hardest, who have been hardest hit, the most vulnerable in this pandemic are the OFWs, the small to medium entrepreneurs. I mean, this is a market that has been driving the real estate property market all these years, right? So, and not only will that impact demand, but even more concerning is that a lot of them, because they've lost their jobs or have been displaced, might default already on properties that they have bought and have started paying. So that's really going to be sad, because it's sad for them, because they might lose whatever amounts they've paid, and at the same time for the developer, then that's an unconsummated sale.
Mm-hmm. Dave, very quickly, how many projects are now in the pipeline that you guys are offering? And do you think you will be able to deliver on time, given the construction work stoppage? How much longer have your timetables adjusted?
Right. Well, AboitizLands is about 13 different projects in northern Luzon, in southern Luzon, and in Cebu. Mm-hmm. And definitely, construction completion is very, very critical to us, for three reasons. Number one, timely construction and delivery to the buyer is a basic promise of a developer. Mm-hmm. Number two, when we're able to deliver the property to the buyer, then we get taken out in the bank. And so in terms of our cash flow, that's important to us. Mm-hmm. And number three, it's only when we're able to turn over that unit to the buyer that we can recognize that sale in our P&L as a revenue. So really, construction is very critical. And unfortunately, all our projects are in ECQ areas, which have imposed very stringent restrictions on construction. Mm-hmm. It's affected we have about 1,200 workers working in all of these projects, and they all can't work. It's stopped. Huh? And so this is really a challenge, and maybe we're hoping that with MECQ we can resume some limited amounts of activity. We hope our contractors can resume right away, but we're looking at anywhere from 3 to 6 months delay in terms of our delivery of the units to our buyers.
You did mention you guys are based in Cebu, but you have expanded with projects in Pampanga, Batangas, Tarlac, and Nueva Ecija. Every city, I imagine, where you are in, must have its own MECQ, GCQ guidelines. How do you plan to navigate? I mean, what do you imagine will now be the biggest challenge in a post-COVID environment when it comes to construction work?
Okay. Again, Michelle, fortunately, we have developed a very comprehensive return to work protocol, both for people going back to the office as well as for those the construction workers who work on our projects. I mean, this entails testing. Everyone who will now go back to work will have to be tested as a precondition to going back to work. Tracing, we have developed an app where we will encourage everyone to download so that we can trace them just in case they turn out positive. Work from home is going to be our primary mode of work, where critical functions are going to be required to go to the office. And we will be monitoring very closely the high-risk employees as well. Of course, social distancing will be followed strictly. And lastly, in our construction sites, we have made sure that all our construction sites have livable barracks for all the construction workers so that they don't have to go out. And that's the risk. When they go out and they come back and then they get infected. So we're making sure that all construction workers remain within barracks, within the development.
Dave, I imagine 2020 is a pretty challenging year, not just for the pandemic, because your major locations also took a bad hit from the Taal eruption earlier this year. Are you now, forced to look elsewhere when you do land banking? Are you now looking at other locations?
Okay. Actually, I think this is our personal view. Among all of the different classes of real estate, we are most bullish and we are most optimistic about the industrial sector. Why? We're looking at two very encouraging trends now. The first trend is what a lot of property experts have called the China plus one trend. What is this China plus one? I think this COVID experience has exposed a lot of these global manufacturers, car manufacturers, pharmaceuticals, whatever. It exposed them to that risk of putting all their eggs in one basket. You know, China is the central manufacturing hub of the globe. And when this hit, they were not prepared. And so now they're thinking, we got to either leave China or have an alternative location. In fact, you've probably been hearing Japanese government, the US government are actually incentivizing their manufacturers either to move out or to find
an alternative.
Alternative locations.
That's us.
Definitely, and definitely the Philippines, with our good quality labor force, with our attractive government incentives, I think will be a beneficiary of that trend.
Okay.
The second trend is, we all know that the Philippine government is undertaking very aggressive economic reform programs to bring back the economy. And one of them is, we're looking very closely, is this Balik Probinsya, where they are incentivizing residential as well as industry to move out of Metro Manila so that they can decongest Metro Manila. And I know, I feel that this would be very attractive, particularly for the manufacturers, because not only for the incentive, but they'll realize they can probably get better value from their Metro Manila land by converting that use from manufacturing to some other high-density use. So we're looking at these two trends, and we think that they will benefit us, which is why, in the case of AboitizLands, even during this COVID, we are very aggressive preparing for it by replanning and repurposing our 3 existing industrial parks, one in Lima, in Lipa, and 2 in Cebu. We're converting them into what we call industrial townships, so that we master planning, repurposing it, so that aside from industrial, we will have commercial, we will have residential, and we will have institutional use, which will cater to all of the needs of a community.
Dave, we don't have...
And, you know, and I feel that Aboitiz is in the best position to do this, number one, because of our track record in industrial operations, and number two, because of our ability to provide power and water from our sister companies.
Dave, we don't have much time. Final question very quickly. I know you guys are celebrating your 25th year this year. Congratulations. Do you think that in the next 25 years, AboitizLand can become a major growth and revenue driver for the parent company, the Aboitiz Group, like how the property arms are for the other conglomerates? We look at the first quarter performance of the conglomerate, it's actually the property and power units that dragged. Do you think that in the next 3 to 5 years, perhaps, that AboitizLand will be a major contributor to AEV's bottom line?
I think that the focus of AboitizLand now over the next 3 to 5 years is really to focus on this, what we call the Zone Plus strategy. We're not going to, we're not going to be distracted and do other things which we know other developers do better than us. We're going to stick to this strategy.
Okay.
Because we think that's our competitive advantage.
Okay. On that note, thank you very much, Dave, for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Mitch. Thank you. Bye.